creation works. This is how it is. It's not as though there is a real change, but there is an apparent change. So this was presented in verse number 6, that there is no real interruption of the human being, even though for the duration of several hours during the night, you are virtually absent. You are not there at all. But you're not really absent. You are just obscured from your identity. So we saw that, and the way it happens is that when you wake up, you recall that I was not there. So we saw all that in our explanation of verse number 6. So now, in verse number 7, as we saw last week, the verse number 7 talks about pratyabhijna as a phenomena. What is the phenomena? How does it work? And so in the first verse I'm going to go through about 12 or so verses of the commentary. So here, the Manasa Ullasa presents the first Manasa Ullasa verse. And by the way, for those of you that have this book by Mahadeva Shastri, I think it would be good for you to actually review the verses of Manasa Ullasa after the class as a revision. I think that would be good because I think some of the English he uses is old style, but you can make adjustment for that. It's not that big a deal. And so I think you should revise it. So that'll be nice. So the first verse of the Manasa Ullasa says, what is the nature of pratyabhijna? You talk about the pratyabhijna as the key thing that allows you to remember what you were missing at night time. What is it? What is the swarupa of it? In fact, there is a very interesting word used in Vedanta, which is called lakshana. So again, I think that along with the understanding of the text that we are doing, you should also slowly become aware of some of the definitions that Vedanta uses. And one of them, for example, technical definitions, this is what I call pratibhasika sat. No, not pratibhasika sat, it's some other word for it. Paribhasha, I think it's called paribhasha, which means it's technical word. So the word here that we use is, in the case of pratyabhijna, what is the lakshana of pratyabhijna? So lakshana is an interesting word. Lakshana means a definition of something which is unique to that thing. It is not shared by anything else. Okay, so for example, when you say a table, the word table is shared by many tables. So that is a lakshana for a family, a jati, called the table jati. But if you were to mean exactly this table, then you would say, the table that is used by the teacher in the classroom in 691, then you uniquely distinguish this from all other tables. This is called the lakshana of this table. So every vastu has a lakshana as the airtight definition which distinguishes it from all other objects in the world. So now the question here is, what is the lakshana of pratyabhijna? So let us go through that technically. This is number one. There are two things that the Manasa Ullasa verse number 1 points out, asks for it. Because Sureshwacharya ji, who wrote Manasa Ullasa, poses his own question and answers it. Because this is how the dialogue is given in Vedanta. You don't wait for a real doubter to come in. A good teacher would actually raise the objections or questions or doubts and then answer it so that you can clarify what the teaching is. So the first verse it says two things. What is the lakshana of pratyabhijna? In fact, I'll read it to you so you can see. So, verse number 1. I don't think this has, does it have the, it has Sanskritam also, you can even read that from here. So it says, Pratyabhijna balat atma sthai nirdharyate yadi ka nama pratyabhijna esha kim va tasya prayojanam. So he says that if you postulate the uninterruptibility of the Atma, the fact that the Atma is never interrupted, on the power of the word pratyabhijna. So pratyabhijna balat, from the bala, from the power of pratyabhijna, if you establish the sthaitvam, the non-interruptibility of the Atma, ka nama pratyabhijna. Means what is the lakshana? What is the swarupa of it? Can you please explain it? What is this thing called pratyabhijna? Number one. The second one is kim va tasya prayojanam. Prayojanam means by understanding that, what does that do for me? How does it help me? Is it just like understanding how many teeth that a crow has? It doesn't really help me. So prayojanam means what is the usefulness of understanding pratyabhijna? So this is the first one, that it sort of sets the tone for the discussion of what pratyabhijna is. So that's number one. The second thing, next verse, it says, I won't read all these, it will take me too long to read all the Sanskritam, but let me just give you the essence of all of them. The second thing is, in number 2, he says, and he raises this himself, so this is the author doing it. He says, pratyabhijna is not a pramanam. It's not a pramanam. So that's another thing that I think we should be very familiar with. So one we saw was the word lakshana. And even more important than that really is the word pramanam. So this is a very, very important thing that you should be very, very familiar with, not just in this text but in any other text. So pramanam means pramajanakam pramanam. One that establishes knowledge of something is called pramanam. The means for establishing knowledge is called pramanam. Means the sadhana for pramanam. So now most of the schools of thought share the following 6 pramanam, and that I think you should also be familiar with, and I think you are. We have talked about it, and I'm sure that you have come across. But then this should really be on your fingertips. There are 6 of them, so you need one hand plus another finger, so 6 of them. So one of them is called pratyaksha. So pratyaksha means that you directly feel it, you directly see it, you directly touch it, you directly smell it. So all the 5 sense organs, The sense organs have been designed by Ishvara to give you knowledge about things. Yes, I saw that person. I feel that this is a stone apple. This is not a real apple. This is a stone apple. So by touching it, you can now establish that this is not a real apple. And then you can even smell it and say there is no smell. It's not a real apple. Like that, all these reliable means of establishing knowledge are called pratyaksha pramanam. So this is the first pramanam, right? Okay. Now comes the second pramanam, and that is called anumana. So anumana means that you postulate that even though there is no pratyaksha, but the virtue of the connection between pratyaksha, and so the classical example is that if you don't actually see a fire in the forest, supposing you're going in a car and far away you see a forest on with some smoke coming out, so you immediately conclude that there is a fire. How? Because of two reasons. One is that you see the fire, and the second reason is you know that without fire there cannot be a black smoke. So this is a postulation. So the anumana is also based on pratyaksha, but it extends the pratyaksha even though you do not visibly see you don't see the fire. But from the smoke, your understanding is that there is a fire. So this is called anumana. This is the second one. Then the third one, which is called arthapatti. And this one is important for this pratyabhigya. We will go into this in more detail on why this is more important for this. We'll establish that. But what it is Swami Dayanand Ji had explained this as a multi-level inference. Anumana is a single level inference. Where there is fire, there is smoke. So this is called a single level inference. But there are others where multiple levels of inferences are also involved. And I remember his example given. I think he had given several examples. The one that sticks in my mind is a pilot adjusting the plane by looking at the dials. This is the example. Oh, by the way, another example, the classical example given, I think we have talked about this, is that if you go to a temple and there is a priest and he's very overweight. And many of the priests have the problem because they do not walk very much, they don't exercise, and they're sitting there at one place, and so very difficult to lose weight. And so many of them, not all of them, but many of them become overweight. And now you had a conversation with him, and he said, Panditji, when do you eat? He says, I don't eat much. In fact, he says, what do you mean? How about breakfast? He says, no, I don't eat breakfast. I might have a banana from someone or something like this. How about lunch? He says, lunch, I'm too busy. Don't eat. How about dinner? He says, dinner, the evening, all the people are there. So when do you eat? He says, I just go home and eat a little bit, and then somehow Bhagwan has just sustained me. So you feel this guy is not telling the truth. Because if he's 300 pounds on a 5'9" frame, there is no way that air will make him so weighty. So this is called arthapatti. So this is a double level anumana, that to add weight you must eat a lot. And number one. Number two, by his saying it, he's just being, either he's out and out lying or he's just sort of being polite and so on. I don't eat much. But I guarantee you, when he goes home, he eats a big meal, and he probably eats it during the day also. We don't know. So this is the classical example of Arthapatti. Swami Dayanand Ji had given the example of a pilot who is doing a good job of piloting the plane. He has to use a number of inferences. One inference he has to use is that if the plane rises up, then the pressure drops, number one. Another inference is that the scale of this instrument is calibrated so that if there is a loss of pressure, it shows up as height. And the third is, so a lot of assumption he has to use. So this is what is called a multi-level anumana, and this will be useful in defining pratyabhijna in a minute. We will come to that. So now we have gone through what? We have gone through three pramanas: pratyaksha, anumana, inference, and arthapatti. Not sure if there is I think the best English definition of arthapatti is presumption. Presumption. So a presumption means a multi-level inference. So just for our purposes. So it's called arthapatti. 3. Fourth one is upamana. So today's class will be mostly on these technical things. And then I have a feeling that we should be able to wrap up the 7th verse next week. And next week, by the way, is Tuesday. And we will not have next Tuesday because Swami Tattvavidanandaji will be there. So whenever we have the next class, I think we will wrap up verse number 7. But today, it is more of the stepping stone to the understanding. And perhaps we may have, and I'm short of time anyway, I was thinking we might do meditation. We'll see how that goes. Most probably I won't do meditation. So the fourth one is called upamana. Upamana means comparison. An accurate comparison. So there you can say, as we have done before, that you go to a different country altogether, a country in Africa. Swamiji had used to give that example. And then you can say there is a new animal that you've never seen that looks like this particular animal. And if you ever see that, that is, they don't have this animal, but they have that animal. That's the name of that animal. It's called a comparison. Or you can say just say that, that person looks like the other person. So there is a comparative evaluation of the person. Just like, for example, if most people can tell. I was just listening to on this long journey for the last hour and a half. I don't know what radio station I should use. So I usually listen to sports talks. So, there's an important game coming up between the 49ers and the Seattle Seahawks. So everybody was calling in regarding that. And one of the callers, his name is JK. He says, JK, you're on. The JK, at the moment he started talking, you said he's an Indian. It's an Indian pronunciation. I think this will not be the case because, there is a certain way of talking that the Indians do. And so this is by comparison. You know how Indians talk, what how their pronunciation is, and this person must be. You don't know for sure. You don't know for sure, but most probably it is a same one. So this is called upamana, fourth one. Then the fifth one is called anupalabdhi. Anupalabdhi means upalabdhi and anupalabdhi. And I don't have time to really write it all down. I'm somewhat of a hurry. And so anupalabdhi means absence. Absence. Absence also is a pramana. Why? Because you can say, was that person there in the room? And you say no. How do you know? Because he was not there. I saw all the people and that person was not there. This is called anupalabdhi, which is also a source of pramana. Last one, in some ways for Vedanta, is the most important one. And that means Shabda Jnanam, Shabdam. Shabdam means the words of a reliable person is called Shabdam. So words of a reliable person are called Shabdam, and this is also a pramana. How? Because without the words of a reliable person, you cannot tell a stranger sitting in the room is a particular person. So I don't know whether you have all heard, you must have all seen, this is not a good example, this our local representative called Ro Khanna. It's very unlikely that Ro Khanna will be coming to this class, but suppose he's sitting there in the back, and you have actually touched him, you've seen him, you've shook, and so on, he's another person, but you don't know he's that Ro Khanna. Unless someone says, I want you to meet the local representative from this district, Mr. Ro Khanna, then you can say, oh, he's that Ro Khanna, of course. So this recognition is done by a reliable person, not a person who is joking, but one you can believe in. So this is a very important one. And we have seen this case where, really speaking, Ishvara is apparently unknown to us. We don't know where Ishvara is. You ask somebody, have you seen Ishvara? He'll say, I don't know. No. But the Ishvara is never absent. Never absent. So it is exactly like Ro Khanna sitting right here. And only a guru can introduce and says, do you know that your consciousness is actually Ishvara? Did you know that? And these are words spoken by a knowledgeable, reliable person, not a jokester. Although we sometimes will say, many people will have this, they'll say, Ishvara is everywhere. Ishvara is everywhere. How? Well, I don't know, but we're supposed to be everywhere. This is not knowledge. You may say, I'm telling you the truth. Yeah, you're telling the truth, but you have no conviction, you have no idea about how you're doing it and so on. But a knowledgeable teacher of Vedanta who can feel the presence of Ishvara can also communicate it to you. So this is what is called Shabda Jnanam. Okay, so these are the 6 pramanams. Now the verse number 2 says, wait a second. You say that Pratyabhijna is a pramanam for proving the uninterruptible continuity of Atma? So we say yes. Now, I have this list of available pramanams, Pratyaksha, Anumanam, Arthapatti, Upamana, Anupalabdhi and Shabdam. I don't see Pratyabhijna as one of them. So how do you say? We've only had 6. All the old wise people in all the world have agreed that these are, some actually don't believe in all five of them, but there is no seventh one. You can either believe in 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 or 6, but no more than 6. That means the ultimate number of pramanams is 6. So Pratyabhijna is not in this list. How can you say Pratyabhijna gives you the pramanam of the continuity of the Atma? This is his question. So then in the placement of verse number 7, Swami Maheshanandji has put these two basic questions before the verse number 7. So he says to answer the three basic things actually, right? What are the three basic questions? One is, what is the Swarupa of Pratyabhijna? Second one is, what is the usefulness of Pratyabhijna? And the third one is, you say Pratyabhijna is a pramanam, but I don't see that in the list. How do you explain it? In order to answer this verse number 7 is given. Balyadishu api jagradadishu tatha sarvasu vasthashu api vyavrittas svanuvartamanam amityantam swarantam sada swatmanam prakiti karoti bhajatam yo mudraya bhadraya tasmai Shri Gurumurtaye namaha Shri Dakshinamurti. This is the 7th verse. So now the discussions about all this starts. So the first one is the definition, the Swarupa, the Lakshana of Pratyabhijna. So let's start with that. So this is given in, it starts with, it continues on, but it starts with the Manasa Ullasa number 3. So it says, and I think we went over this a little bit last week, where Swami Maheshanandji had said that the definition, the English definition of Pratyabhijna is, does anybody recall what that is? Recognition of self-identity, right? So, recognition of self-identity is called Pratyabhijna. This is who I am and this is who I was. So the recognition of self-identity also can have some doubts. In fact, when you say, this is how I was and this is how I am, supposing you make this statement. You know, we all do that. So, for example, we say, when I was young, when I was a teenager, we all say things like that. You know, and when I was a teenager, things were different. This is the statement you make. So now, in the statement, when I was a teenager, you are, interestingly enough, mixing up change with non-change. Change with non-change. How? Because you say, I was, and I am not the same. Now I am a middle-ager. I used to be a teenager. True. But you also say, I. You don't say, there was a teenager and now I am this. You don't say that. You say, I was a teenager. So this is an important definition of Pratyabhijna. So Pratyabhijna has two components. And those are, it is not any memory. Like, for example, you can say, I often tell people that when I came to San Jose in 1964, the total population of San Jose was 200,000. and Lockheed was the biggest company. And the number of I remember this so well. I used to work in IBM, and the Blossom Hill Road from IBM to Los Gatos had one light, cruiser. Now I don't think you can even count on a hand how many lights there are. So you can say, I have a memory of San Jose in 1964, 65 actually. I came from Berkeley in 65 after I graduated. So I can say this is what San Jose was, and this is what San Jose is today. This is also memory, comparisons, some pratyaksha and so on. But this is different. It means I was young and now I am old. So in this statement, I used to be and I am has two components where I'm mixing up change and non-change. Really, therein lies the creation of the whole universe. The whole creation is a mixture of change and non-change. Some things are changing, some things are not changing, and you cannot have change without a non-change, as we will see it more clearly. So going back to the definition of pratyabhijna, pratyabhijna means a personal experience, anubhava, personal experience about myself, and also memory. Two components. Smriti plus anubhava equals pratyabhijna. Mere smriti, it is not pratyabhijna. Okay, so this is number one. This is the important definition of, now we are done with the definition of pratyabhijna. Some more other things will come, but for now I think we are done. Then in verse number 4 and 5, this is analyzed further. And if you read number 4 and 5 on your own, we won't do that here. There is a word there in number 4, which says, anyway, I'll just read it. Tat desha kala akaradin avadhuyan anushangikan. Anushangikan is an interesting word. This is another Sanskrit word that you may want to remember. Anushangikan. And Anushangikan means one which appears as such due to an incidental connection. Anushangikan means that, so there are two differentiated things. One is called swabhava. Actually, there are three things in some way. So one you can say is swarupa, and I think we have done this before. So one is called swarupa. Swarupa means one which, and swarupa, really speaking, you can say it as a definition for anything, but ultimately it only makes sense as a swarupa for Atma. So let's leave swarupa alone for a minute. Let's just talk about things in the world. Things in the world are known by two elements. One is called swabhava, and one is called anushangika. You can, I don't know what the noun would be. Anushangika is a quality. So you can even say Anushangikan. Yeah, you can just say Anushangikan vastu, something. So as a general thing, you can say Anushangikan. So here, now look at this. Swami Maheshananji gives this example. He says, suppose you take coal, C-O-A-L. Now, tell me, is the black color of coal Anushangikan or is it Swabhavan? Is it Swabhava? What do you think?
Swabhava.
Why?
Because there's no other coal form there, it has to be.
Right. So the pure definition, you're right, it is Swabhava. The reason it is Swabhava is because if you take that quality away, it is no longer the Vastu. In fact, this is what happens. This ash that I'm wearing on my forehead used to be a coal. Is no longer called coal because it has become ashes. So you've taken the black out of it, which is a very... So this means a idea of intrinsic versus incident. So Swabhava is intrinsic and Anushangika is incident. And incidental means that sure enough you can identify things with the incidental quality. No doubt about it. But those, you are still there without them. So for example, Swami Maheshananji gives this example. Supposing a person is very thin, or a person is overweight, a person is has a smooth skin, or a person has got a lot of wrinkles, a person is running fast, or a person is sitting one place, not even to run. So all these qualities, they are not swabhavas. Because even when you say, when I was young, that is not your swabhava. Why is it not your swabhava? Because you are still there while you are no longer young. So the youth is not a swabhava. Okay, so this is one thing that we'll go forward with several aspects of this. But this is one aspect that we should be very clear about. And that is that what is incidental and what is the intrinsic for us. This we must be able to do. Okay. Now, another thing is, can you have incidental without intrinsic? You can't. You can't. Because it is exactly the same thing. This is where Pratyabhijna comes in. If you will never be able to make a statement when I was young. Why? Because the youth is based on I. So there we have, doesn't mean that the I that I'm referring to is Atma. I that I'm referring to is my identity as a jiva. So my identity as a jiva is now pretty firm. And then as an identity of a jiva, I'm capable of being young or old or fat or thin. That I agree. But the resolution of that, the intrinsic nature of that is like a jiva. And then you say, well, what is this jiva? What is this? Who is this jiva that you're talking about, in which all the incidental things are coming and going, and the intrinsic doesn't go? What is this? What is the shape of this jiva? And you cannot answer that. You'll say, I don't know. You know, my name and I was born and so if you look at a name, that is also incidental. Because your mom and dad might have named you somebody completely differently. You didn't have a name for 4 or 5 days. That means it's not intrinsic, it's incidental. And so on and so forth. So anything you describe about yourself, really speaking, is incidental. Okay, so this is an important thing to see. So two things. One is to distinguish between incidental and intrinsic. Secondly, you see that the incidental requires an intrinsic. The third thing to see is, can any intrinsic quality, any incidental quality be resident on an inert thing? Can any incidental things? Now, when you are talking about an inert object, yes. So, for example, you can say that the wood is now worn. It used to be a fresh-looking wood and is no longer fresh. So the freshness or the lack thereof is an incidental quality and it can reside on the wood. That's okay. But when you say, I was young, do you think that the youth and the old age, not just the youth and old age, but all the other things that you're saying can that reside in a jadavastu? No. Because that can only reside on a chetana vastu, on a sentient being. So when you say I was young, yes, because of the body being young, you're saying I was young. But what we are trying to do is to say that all the qualities that you are using as a conclusion about yourself are resident on you. Even I'm happy, unhappy, I'm this, I'm that, is all based on I. And also another thing, so I'm really skipping quite a few and just trying to go fast in summarizing all these points. Some of them are meticulously pointed out in some separate verses and so on. So I'm going to give you an overall thing and then I'll come back and maybe establish some more detail. Another thing, when you say I was young, so now clearly by this analysis you are highlighting an incidental quality, because the youth is now gone. You're no longer young. So it cannot be intrinsic, it is a incidental. And secondly, the incidental relies, it's resident on the I. The third thing is, another thing is, I don't know, third or whatever, another thing is that the incidental requires the Chetana Vastu, the sentient Vastu, to make it into a reality. So what does that mean? What it means is, and I think we may have done it in the last couple of classes, but let me summarize that again. And in fact, when you, really the important thing to see, and you should really meditate on this on your own sometime, that, so just another example, and I will put it back here in this context. When you say there is no sun, you have to rely on the light of the sun to say there is no sun. Very important meditation. You cannot make a statement that there is no sun unless it is deep in darkness of the night. And that also is, it is not an exception. It just is a slightly different example. But let's look at the example of a very cloudy day where there is no possibility of the sun coming out, and you say there is no sun. In saying that, you are aided by the light of the sun. The light of the sun makes you to say that there is no sun. Clearly, when you say there is no sun, there is sun. Similarly, when you say, I am no longer young, that means what? That means that I am now limited by the fact that I am no longer young. Youth is no longer my own property. I wish I was young, but I can't. This fact is lighted by an unchanging, unlimited I. See this fact. The Atma alone lights up your sense of limitation. The unlimited Atma lights up, and you can say, why do I know this is an unlimited Atma? Maybe it's a limited Atma that is lighting up a limitedness. This is not true, because you are always I. All you're doing is continuously looking at the limitations, continuously, unchangingly. Your consciousness never disappears. It is an interesting thing, because this sun may disappear. And actually now we can go to this darkness of the night example, which I said, that's a different example. So look at this. As far as the sun is concerned, it creates a semblance of darkness in two ways. Just look at this. One is that it creates water vapor from the ocean, and there it becomes a dark cloud full of water. And the darkness of the cloud obscures the sun from a different angle, that's all. So it's not as if the sun has disappeared. Rahu grasta divankarendu sadrisho, same thing. The sun has never disappeared. So it creates a condition where it allows some person to say there is no sun. The sun has created this. And it continues to shower enough light for this person to say there is no sun. This is number one. Now let's go back to the darkness of the night. Do you know the sun has created the earth? And it has created earth for a very particular reason. I don't know what the world would be like if it was not spinning and half the time we are in darkness and the other. We have to really think about it. Maybe we should give you a homework assignment. That would be an interesting thing. That you tries to be a Ishvara and try to come out with a creation in which there is no darkness, no light. How will it be? I don't know what, so the changes and the darkness and the sleep and resting and then emerging, all this is possible by the sun. So even the sun never becomes dark. This is where I think one of the very fundamental aspects of the whole creation are different suns at various places. Because without an unchanging light and a heat to go along with it, and also to make life possible by having inert bodies like earth and moon all swirling around, it's not possible. Anyway, what it means is that when you say there is no sun, this is not an absolute statement. It's a very relative statement from a given viewpoint, under circumstances. And even that statement is only possible because of the presence of the sun. Unchanging, relatively speaking, even though there are some changes in the sun itself. But when it comes to the Atma, just imagine all of the life is due to the unchanging presence of consciousness, the Atma. And all limitations, all changes, all the incidental aspects are depending on the Atma and lighted up by the Atma. This is the truth. So the Pratyabhigya now, we can close the topic, close the discussion about the topic. When thought through the very nature of Pratyabhigya, it means that one should see that it has two aspects: an unchanging sun-like consciousness, light, Satchidanandaha, which is lighting up any sense of limitation. And I remember Swami Maheshananji pointing this out at various places. And I think I mentioned this to you, I don't know whether it was in this class or something else, that people think, Atma is very difficult to find, very difficult to understand. Not only Atma, but Ishvara is the same thing, really speaking. Absolutely the same thing. I don't know where Ishvara is. Maybe we should go to Himalayas and go to do some prayer. There may be there, Vaikuntha maybe. Somewhere there. Swamiji says, I cannot understand. Don't you see the Ishvara is everywhere as you as the conscious. It is not your consciousness, it is Ishvara's consciousness that you have taken over, and you are saying, I am a jiva. I can do this, I can move, I can see, so on and so forth. You've mislabeled it as a jiva. And so whenever you whenever you see something as a conscious person, there is where the consciousness and Ishvara, unchanging consciousness and unchanging Ishvara is. Don't you see that? That whenever you see something which is changing, you also see that it is unchanging. Whenever you see something limited, see that you are unlimited. That's what the truth is. It's that simple. We think, no, it cannot be that simple. That's too obvious. There must be something more. There isn't. It is our inability to face simple facts. And we are so enamored with saying, no, I have to study more. I have to do some more things. And I'm not quite ready yet. You're ready. You're already there. You're just not recognizing your own Swarupa. So this is the sense of Pratyabhijna. So when you talk about what is the Swarupa of Pratyabhijna and what is the Prayojanam, you cannot even think about the Prayojanam. You know, Swami Dayanand used to say, he says, you know what? Our mindset in our life is what is useful to me. He says, all the way, I still remember his words, he says, all the way from a toothbrush onwards, we look upon things as being useful to me. Yes, a toothbrush is important for brushing your teeth. So you look upon everything as utilitarian. And in the process of doing so, you look upon yourself also as what is useful to me. How useful am I? This is also from a standpoint of utility of other things. The Atma is not useful. It has no uselessness. Not a relative useful. It is absolute usefulness. This I have to see. And this is not that difficult to see. If I just look at this is what is called Shabda Jnanam. This is what Shabda Jnanam means, that your consciousness is there all the time. And we say, oh, that's not a big deal. I just want to do some good things in my life. Why? You don't need to. You don't need to do anything. There's nothing to be done. There is something to be known. And you are the very unlimited Satyam Jnanam Anantam, Sarva Vyapakam. No, but I don't quite appreciate it. Fine, I understand that, but just stay with it. So this is the central theme of verse number 7. So I think, let me see if there is something else which I wanted to do. So one interesting quotation is from Gita chapter 7, which talks about the same thing. He says, Mai sarvamidam proktam sutre manigana iva. So Krishna makes that statement as the avatara. And so this means, really speaking, that see your consciousness, because you are no different from, you are, it's not as though you have reached Ishwaratvam. You have no longer Jiva, and so it is really just Ishvara. This is the Brahman. And all things are like things that are hanging from Brahman. They're hanging from Brahman, just like you have various things hanging from a sutra. Sutra means a string that holds it all together. Manigana iva. Sutram. Mai sarvam idam protam sutre manigana iva. The sutra means the one which holds everything together. And so the Atma has all these incidentals that are hanging from the intrinsic. And different experiences and so on. And they are all based and hanging from the Atma. And so here, so chapter 7, which we are going to begin soon on the Gita chapter 7 class on Saturday. Now, the focus in chapter number 7 shifts over from the individual to Ishvara. But the context remains the same. So the sutra that he talks about as an Ishvara is the same sutra that you and I have in our life, from which our incidental experiences are strung out of. They are strung from it. And not affecting the sutra at all. They come and go. So that is another very beautiful verse that was cited by Swami Maheshananji. So I might as well just read this. I think I'm pretty much done with that. Another point, I didn't touch on. In verse number 7 of the Manasa Ullasa, the definition of arthapatti, because I mentioned that in the very beginning, that the arthapatti is important in the understanding of pratyabhijna. You remember I had said that earlier. So here's, and I never really touched on that. So let me touch on that now. So there is a discussion, some Purva Paksha, some doubter has to say, wait a second, how is, you never answered my doubt that how is pratyabhijna a pramanam? You remember we have talked about the Swarupa and the Prayojanam. But the third thing that was brought up is that we don't see pratyabhijna in the count of the accepted pramanam. So this verse number 7 answers that by saying that really speaking, the arthapatti is a pramanam even though it hides itself as a pratyaksha. So it is, you can say that it is kind of masquerading as pratyaksha. So if you have to be, a purist about it, you can say it is part of pratyaksha. But it is not really part of pratyaksha. Why not? Because in the pratyaksha, all the sense organs directly give you experience. I saw the person, I heard the person, and so on. I touched the apple, etc. Direct experience. And by the way, the pratyaksha can give you wrong pramana, wrong prama. Because you can tell someone, yes, I saw the person, but they might have been somebody else. You're not sure that you were certain about it. You can say that I saw an apple sitting there, but in fact it was not a real apple. You never really touched it, you never smelled it. So the pratyaksha can also give you bhranti janya prama, or what is called bhrama. But in the case of pratyabhijna, there is something more than pratyaksha, because the pratyaksha is gone, but it has left a samskara for you. See, samskara or vasana, there are similar words. Vasana has a negative connotation and samskara has a positive connotation. That's all. So the classical example of vasana, which Swami Chinmayananda used to say, and in his case he was a big, if you go to Chinmaya Mission, it is interesting how this is what is called prakriya. So prakriya means a method of understanding. So Swami Chinmayananda had sort of developed his own prakriya. If you remember, this is called Om at the top, and then you have BMI, PFT, these 9 things at the bottom, and in between the Om there is a V called Vasana. And Swamiji was very fond of talking about Vasana. And to a point that, in my opinion, I mean, I may be wrong, I think the followers of Chinmaya Mission, followers of Swami Chinmayanandaji, have a wrong impression of what Vasana is. At least it was in my time. I think may have changed, so I'm not going to blame anyone. I think the Vasana is overdone, and the way it is presented. Anyway, I don't want to go into all of that. Anyway, the point is this. The way Swamiji used to explain Vasana is that when you are cutting onions and you're doing a lot of onion cutting for making some vegetable and so on and so forth, and then after the onions are done, then you wash your hands and so on. But the onions are so strong that it leaves a vasana even in your fingers. This is why people brush their teeth after eating Indian meal, because people say, oh, you just had some onions, didn't you? And so it doesn't go easily. So when it doesn't go easily, here's what happens. This is what pratyabhijna is. The pratyaksha is gone, but in a very subtle form, the memory of the pratyaksha is still there. So therefore, Sureshwaracharya ji argues that the pratyabhijna can be considered as part of pratyaksha, but it's more than what pratyaksha is, because it has its vasana and smriti, etc., all involved in it. So you are no longer young. You cannot see your body as young. You can only see some old pictures. That's all you can say, but you cannot see. That's gone. But the memory of youth is still there. Vasana of the youth is still there. So this very peculiar pratyaksha, which gives rise to a wrong impression that I can be changing. I used to be young, I'm old, and I'm going to die. This is how we do it, because we have not really separated the intrinsic from the incident. So now so this is called arthapatti. You see that? So now the arthapatti means a presumption. It's a kind of like a multi-level anumana, presumption, that it must be me. I used to be, there's no one else has, because see, my estimation is that my experience was that I was young. And my experience is now I'm old. So that means my experience must be the same in both the cases. But in doing so, all I have not done is the viveka of the difference between intrinsic and incidental. That's it. So it is a pratyabhijna and it is also called an arthapatti. So this was also pointed out, and I think with that we are pretty much done. I have not gone over, I think I've gone over about half of the verses. The other verses I have not gone through, but I have a feeling that the next time when we meet, then we will wrap up, because I think the technical aspects of the pratyabhijna are done, and we will wrap up with what it means, and we can probably do a meditation on it, and with that we can wrap up verse number 7. Om asato ma satgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityorma amritam gamaya. Om purnamadav purnamidam purnat purnamudachyate purnasya purnamadaya purnamevavashishyate. Om shanti shanti shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Any questions from today's class?
I just wanted to make a comment. We're going to set up the hall at 3 o'clock.
Oh yeah,
on
thanks,
Sunday.
yes.
So if anybody can volunteer.
So this coming Sunday at 3 o'clock, we're just going to set up the hall